All right, we're going to be talking about planning out your music, why it can be useful, how it can help you write some longer pieces of music. Doesn't really apply to songs or short pieces of music that are, 2.5 to 3 minutes long, but it can be useful for writing longer pieces of music like a full entire album, a concept album, a symphony, or something else like a long 45-minute big band arrangement. So let's get into it. Hey, I'm Schanno Johnson. If you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff, music composition, music production. So make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. All right, let's get into it. So let's talk about how this can be useful, planning out your music. If you haven't ever written music in this way, it can be a little weird because you're thinking about the different sections of your music before you have those sections written. You're thinking about larger structures within your music before you even might have one note down. Form in music is the idea of different sections of music and how they relate to each other. And most music can be looked at with some type of form in mind. You can sort of try to make some form from looking at a piece of music for most music. And some forms, like song forms, are going to be using a couple sections that they reuse in different ways. For example, song form might be verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, chorus. That's a pretty common song form. Some other forms of music might be something like sonata, like writing a sonata, not sonata form, or writing a symphony, or a concept album, or something else, like a jazz big band arrangement that's, 15 minutes long. It'll have some type of form that you can look at, and you can look at it in some way in terms of form. So planning your music when you're writing these long structures, really big pieces of music, can be really useful because then you know sort of where you're headed before you get there. So we're going to be talking about it as if we're writing a concept album that's a symphony, that's electronic music, and also about 45 to 50 minutes long. Something like that, something, maybe titled Expanding an Electric Symphony by Schanno Johnson. I don't know. We're going to be talking about something similar to that. It might be a worthwhile thing to check out and listen to. I've heard it's good. But we're going to be checking out something like that, sort of talking about how we can plan out our music in those terms. Let's get into it. First thing is plan the entire length of the piece of music and then plan out what each section is going to be. For example, if we are writing a piece of music that's a symphony played by electronic instruments and it's called Expanding and it's titled an electric symphony and it's written by Schanno Johnson, and we're planning out this piece of music, we need to figure out how long do we want this piece of music to be. And how long do we want each section to be? Do we want it to be 45 minutes of just straight through composed music where none of it relates back to the original ideas? Or do we want it to be sort of recursive or cyclical, where you have these ideas that come back at different points in the song? How many movements are there going to be is another way that you can think about this. If you're writing, a concept album, how many songs is it going to be? How long are each of those songs going to be? Roughly, right? You can think 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes. It doesn't have to be, okay, this song's going to be exactly 4 minutes, 47 seconds, and then it's going to end. But plan out generally how long each different section is going to be. It can help you sort of in your head and on paper, often is how I do it, is organize the different sections so that you know where everything's going and you know how much space you need to fill, how much space you have, right? Because then you sort of can just get a little more organized with the ideas that you're using in your piece of music, and it'll make the entire thing sound a little bit more planned out, and it'll, make it just a little more organized so it doesn't sound all over the place and scattered. Next thing we can plan out is key changes. Are there going to be any key changes, or are the songs going to all be in the same key? Where are the key changes going to happen? This is something that I often plan out if I'm writing a long piece of music. For example, my album, Expanding an Electric Symphony, that one I planned out which different songs were going to be in specific keys, and at what point in each song was it going to change key. I'm currently writing a new electric symphony. It's not going to be titled Electric Symphony. I took that title from one of my teachers that I had at Berklee College of Music, who was very influential on me in my music compositional process, who passed away as I was writing that piece of music. So I dedicated the album to him, and in a way to tribute to him, I took the title of one of his pieces, which was Electric Symphony. Great piece of music if you're able to find it. It's by Vuk Kalenovich. It is a lot, but it is cool. There's a lot of ideas in there that I think are really cool. But I'm writing a new Electric Symphony to be played by, synth instruments, all that fun stuff, and it's going to be structured like a 4-movement symphony, so I got to plan out what are the 4 movements, what are they going to be like, what's the form of each of them, what keys are they going to be in. So you plan out ahead of time what key each song is going to be in. That way you can, if you want to, create this larger structure. For example, maybe you have a melody that the first 5 notes are C, D, E, G. Maybe you could have, if you really want to be clever and really get into the cyclical stuff, sort of like you're making a puzzle, you have the first movement be in C, the second one be in D, the third one be in E, and then the last one be in G. Now they could be major, minor, Lydian, Dorian, whatever mode you want, but it can be a fun little puzzle to put into your music that sort of like you're making an inside joke for yourself, that the first 4 notes of that melody are also the keys of the 4 movements of that symphony. Next thing is plan out the form of each of the separate forms. Plan out the different forms you're going to use in each song or movement or whatever it is. For example, for expanding, I planned out ahead of time the first 3 songs were going to be all within the first movement. Then each of those was going to be a specific form, ABA. And then the next 2 were going to be the next movement. The next 2 were going to be the next movement. And then the last 3 songs on that album were going to be the 4th movement of my symphony. And planning it ahead of time like that just makes it a lot easier to write the music, because then you're not sort of guessing where you want it to go. You know where it's supposed to be headed before you get there. I did the same thing for the new piece of music that I'm writing right now, and it's not going to be 8 or so, 3 plus 2 plus 2. It's not going to be 10 songs like Expanding is. Had to do some quick math. But it's going to be 4 different songs. But I did plan out what each form of each movement is going to be, each song. And then I planned out where the key changes are, what's going to happen in each thing. Gets you a little more organized so that okay, I'm writing, for example, I'm writing a theme of variations as the second movement. I know that each variation needs to be roughly 30 measures long. That's about a minute at the tempo that I'm using. So I need to plan ahead. Okay, I'm almost done with this variation. Then I got to write another variation. Got to put in another variation after that. I'm trying to get it roughly to about 7 minutes. So that includes theme, then, a couple variations, 4 or 5, and then theme again at the end. That's the structure I want to use for that song. So it gets you a little more organized and makes it a lot easier sometimes, because then I can think of a whole bunch of different variations I want to use and, cross out the ones I don't like and only include the ones that I do like. So I'm writing all of these ideas up here, sort of circling the ones I like, taking those, plugging them into my piece of music in whatever order I want them to be plugged into, and then that's the finished piece of music. It can make it a little more organized. You can make it a little more organized and a little easier to write larger forms of music when you have these structures already in place. Okay, last thing is to plan out any transitions or cadences that you're going to want to use, or what material you're going to use. I'm going to group these all together. So if you have any key changes, for example, are you going to have key changes within a song? How are you going to navigate that key change? Is it going to be direct, or are you going to modulate in a different way? Are you going to use a pivot chord or something? And I know this can be really analytical way of composing and thinking, but if you want a certain effect and you know the sound of that effect and you know how you want to go about writing that effect, you kind of have the composition, that idea written already, and you just need to flesh out the details. So you don't necessarily need to be thinking about these super analytical terms, but maybe you want to go from, let's say, A major to C minor. It's a pretty far key change, right? Those two keys aren't super related, but you want it to have a smooth transition. Okay, so then you got to use a couple different chords in the middle of that, maybe hold them out for a little bit so that that transition is more smooth, rather than just going, okay, bar 8, we're switching to C minor, let's go, bam, C minor. That's not going to be a smooth transition. It's going to sound abrupt. So you can use these ideas to smooth out that transition and make sure that you're writing something that sounds the way you want it to sound. Another thing you can do is plan out the specific materials that you're using. I have a video called Gather Your Materials. I'll link that up in a card. And that specific video talks about planning out all of the different melodic materials you're going to use. I'm a big fan of doing this because then it can kind of be like you're writing in terms of larger structures rather than only writing in specific notes. Now, you got to do both if you're writing a piece of music. Of course, you're writing notes and larger structures if you're writing larger structures, but it can make it a little easier to manage all of these different things that you're thinking about, right? I at least can't just be thinking, oh God, I need to write 50 minutes of music for this album. Oh, it's so much music. What am I gonna write? If you're thinking about that, it can be really overwhelming to write 50 minutes of music, or even 15 minutes of music if you haven't ever written that long of a piece or that long of a series of pieces or whatever. So thinking about it in terms of, okay, I want these first 5 minutes to be this one piece that's going to be, a moderate tempo. The next 5 minutes are going to be a separate piece in a different key, and it's going to be a little bit slower of a tempo. And then the last one is going to be a little bit faster than the first one. And it's going to be also in that same home key that we started in, right? So you're planning ahead. Okay, we got 15 minutes on our musical clock, our musical compositional clock. First 5 is in, let's say, D major, and it's at a tempo 135 or something. Okay, great. And then the next piece, we have another 5-minute piece. This one's going to be about 86 BPM, and it's going to be in the key of B flat minor. Okay. Great. Last 5 minutes are going to be a little faster. It's going to be a tempo of 152, and it's going to be back in the key of D major, like that original song at the beginning. Okay, great. Now we just need to write 3 different pieces, each 5 minutes long, within those respective keys and tempos. That makes it a little more manageable than just thinking, okay, great, write 15 minutes of music, go. You can sort of plan out what it's going to be so that when you listen to it at the end, it'll sound like one cohesive, one coherent whole piece of music that was written as one whole piece of music, right? It can make it easier to write these things, these larger forms that sort of make sense together rather than sounding like a whole bunch of different pieces that are shoved together at the end. I'm a big fan of Kendrick Lamar for his music because he does this all the time with his albums. His albums To Pimp a Butterfly and Damn are written as these pieces of music that work together as a whole, as opposed to something like Scorpion by Drake is a bunch of pieces of music that are put together in a one group, but they're not necessarily written to flow together. Drake's album More Life has this flow to it where all of the songs sound related and they sound more cohesive. Same thing with Worlds by Porter Robinson, something like that. But Kendrick Lamar's music does this a ton. It's why I'm a big fan of this stuff. Is a lot of it is kind of like a symphony in a lot of ways, but a symphony for rap music, right? For hip hop music. A lot of that is something that you kind of have to think about ahead of time if you're not used to writing that way and you haven't written that way a lot. It's something that you kind of want to think about, okay, what's the idea that I have? I got to start from the top and then figure out all the details rather than just writing a whole bunch of stuff and shoving it together. That's some tips on how you can write some longer forms of music. It's how I wrote Expanding an Electric Symphony. Definitely check it out. It's on Spotify, Bandcamp, Tidal, all the places you can listen to music. All right, that's it for this video. I know it's a lot of information thinking about all this stuff if you write music and are trying to write something that's a longer form, but I hope that cleared up some stuff for you. Hopefully you learned something about music. Hopefully you found that useful. If you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.